Hi, it's Mark Graben. Welcome to Lean Blog Audio. This is episode 424, and today I'm reading a blog post that I published on August 2nd, 2025. It's titled, 3 Ways Pressure Warps Performance Metrics and What Leaders Must Do Instead. To read the blog post, if you want to comment or share it with others, look for a link in the show notes or go to leanblog.org/audio 424. Accurate data is essential in any system for diagnosing problems, guiding decisions, and driving improvement. But when leaders react poorly to uncomfortable data, the message often gets buried and the system loses its ability to learn. When the truth becomes dangerous to report, people stop sharing it. That's when improvement stops as well. We've seen this on a grand scale throughout history. We think about times when reporting reality became a crime. In Stalin's Soviet Union, Soviet statistics who documented agricultural shortfalls were imprisoned or worse. Fear discouraged honesty. Data was doctored. The famine that followed wasn't a result of bad measurement. It was the result of suppressing the truth. Mao's Great Leap Forward, when local officials in communist China, under pressure to report inflated crop yields, sent fictitious numbers to the central government. The false narrative led to catastrophic food shortages. Tens of millions died, while the charts and graphs showed progress. Zimbabwe's hyperinflation. During its economic collapse, the government silenced economists who tried to publish real inflation figures. Price increases became obvious to everyone except in the official data. And then we have Argentina's statistical gag. At one point, the government fined independent economists for publishing their own inflation estimates. The message was clear. Political comfort mattered more than economic accuracy. These are extreme examples. They're from outside the business world. They are from autocratic leaders in different countries. But the behavior, punishing the truth to protect appearances, is something we still encounter in more subtle ways today in business and sometimes really blatant. I mean, just recently, a senior here in the US where I live, a senior government statistician was abruptly fired following the release of a disappointing jobs report. The data was valid, the revisions were routine, but the report didn't support the preferred narrative, so the messenger was blamed and at least not literally shot, but fired. This outcome isn't surprising to anyone who's familiar with Brian Joyner's timeless warning, which Dr. W. Edwards Deming often cited. When you put a numerical goal on a process, people will do one of 3 things. 1, improve the process. 2, distort the process. Or 3, distort the data. Improving the process is, sadly, the hardest of those 3 options. When fear and pressure replace safety and support, distortion becomes the default. So the antidote is psychological safety and constructive leadership. So psychological safety, it's not a nice to have. It's not a bunch of feel-good mumbo jumbo. It is a prerequisite or foundation for learning and improvement. This is where leaders like Larry Culp, the CEO of GE Aerospace and the former CEO of Danaher, a great lean example, an exemplar, I really should say, provides a striking contrast. During a fireside chat at the 2022 AME conference with my friend Katie Anderson, Larry spoke candidly about the challenge of making it safe for bad news to reach the top. He said, quote, "Bad news does not typically travel fast. People can be overly deferential." He doesn't just acknowledge the problem, he has owned his role in changing this environment. At one point in his career, during a company acquisition, somebody told him at that company they were looking at, "We no longer talk about bad news. It's been deemed bad for morale." That was a red flag, but Larry saw an opportunity. You can fix that kind of culture. As he told the story, he said, we'll let the bad news in. We'll deal with that reality. We'll work those problems. And that's the mindset of a leader who builds trust instead of breaking it. Later, Larry described a pivotal moment. Somebody on his team, visibly nervous, came forward with bad news. It was hard to hear. but Larry listened, engaged, and helped solve the issue. And most importantly, the team saw that it was safe to speak the truth. He said, quote, "That was the moment of truth. Do you shoot the messenger or do you listen even if you're unhappy?" And there's a whole blog post about these lessons and more about his talk at the AME conference. You can find a link to that in the blog post. Again, go to leanblog.org/audio424. But this isn't just a CEO thing. As Larry, I think, wisely noted, culture change doesn't rely solely on the CEO. I think it starts there and it tends to flow downhill. But Larry said anyone at any level can create this environment. We could call this a pocket of psychological safety. When someone speaks up, do they get support or skepticism? Do they feel heard or hurried? So, quote, "Any of us have the opportunity to create that environment where people want to bring forward an issue and know they're going to get help." That's leadership. That's respect for people. I would say that's the foundation of Lean. So how do we improve? If punishing the truth leads to fear and distorted metrics, then the path forward involves building systems and cultures where people feel safe to speak up and where leaders are equipped to listen. As I often say, improvement and Lean and what have you requires 2 PSs, psychological safety and problem solving. But here are 5 practical actions that leaders can take to improve. 1, respond instead of reacting. When someone brings you bad news, your first reaction sets the tone. A calm, curious response invites more honesty. A defensive or emotional reaction shuts down the conversation. So instead of saying, well, why didn't you fix this sooner? Try, "Thank you for bringing this to me. Let's understand what's really happening." This shift alone can change the culture over time. Secondly, celebrate transparency, not just results. Recognize and reward people who surface problems, even if the metrics are off track. Focus praise on behaviors like honesty or candor, learning, and initiative, not just outcomes. People will continue doing the things they're recognized for. A lean-minded leader might say, "We didn't hit the target, but we found a real issue and we're working on it. That's a win." Third, use tools that promote understanding, not judgment. Instead of chasing every fluctuation in performance, you can use tools like process behavior charts to understand variation and trends. This helps teams and leaders distinguish between common cause variation and true signals that require action. I would point you to my book, Measures of Success, for more about that. Process behavior charts shift the conversation when we have the right mindsets. At least it enables us to shift from asking who's to blame and instead what's changing in the system. I've embedded a link to another blog post, deeper dive on this topic. It's titled "From Chaos to Clarity: How a Health System CEO Used Process Behavior Charts to Shift the Culture." Again, you'll find a link in this blog post. Fourth, make it safe, then make it worthwhile. As Amy Edmondson and others have emphasized, psychological safety is foundational, but safety without action can still lead to disengagement. Another professor, Amy Edmondson's at Harvard Business School, Ethan Burris at the University of Texas, Austin, the McCombs School of Business. Burris's research reminds us of the second F word in organizational life. If it's not failure, if it's not fear, it's futility. Either of those could lead to that other F word, failure. People might feel safe to speak up, but if nothing happens, they stop trying. So let's make sure ideas, data, and concerns flow to a place where something can and will be done. I'd invite you, embedded in the blog post, also as a podcast with Professor Edmondson on psychological safety and her book, The Fearless Organization. And then fifth, model the behavior at every level. As Larry Culp showed in his leadership at GE Aerospace and Danaher, leaders must consistently walk the talk. That means asking for the bad news, handling it well even when it stings, shifting into a collaborative problem-solving mode, and showing that honesty leads to progress, not punishment. Because it only takes one bad reaction to undo months of effort on culture and changing that. But it also takes just one strong, visible example to start changing the culture. So to end the post, I propose you start with this question. As a leader, you might try asking this in your next team meeting. What's something we're not seeing or not saying because it might make us uncomfortable? And then pause, listen, and thank whoever speaks. That's how the shift begins. Because in a culture of continuous improvement, bad news isn't the enemy, it's a gift. As Toyota people often say, problems are treasure. And the people who bring it to you, they're not troublemakers. They're, I guess, the treasure finders. They're your best allies. Let's make it safe to speak up. Let's make it count. Let's get better for real. So again, you can find the blog post if you want to read it, find those other posts and podcasts that I mentioned if you want to comment or share it. Please go to leanblog.org/audio424. Thanks.